Bear with me. Technology and such. Okay. So once again, thank you guys for coming to summer school. This is our second session. We're doing Thriving and Surviving with a New Foster with Dan Scotetti, who is going to take over in just a moment here. So this is our second pause program session for the summer. I am going to mute everybody during the beginning. Um, like I said before, if you want to ask questions throughout, Dan is happy to take your questions throughout the presentation. If you want to unmute, you can also put your questions into the chat, and we can answer them that way. I think there is going to be a little bit of time at the very end for questions for folks if you want to ask them then. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Dan.
All right.
Yay!
Good evening, everybody. So, thriving and surviving with a new foster. I'm sure most folks on the call have gone through this or a new dog. Still pretty applicable for a new adopted dog as well. So, we'll jump right in. We'll cover a handful of things from preparing for your foster, supporting the transition, kind of skills to build with your new foster, and then we'll talk about the concept of ready for adoption. All right, so a few things when you have a new foster that I always just like to drill into people just from an expectation perspective. Behaviors that get rewarded or practiced get repeated. So good and bad, the more our dog performs something, the more normal that becomes. For a new dog, it is significantly easier to give a dog freedom than it is to take it away. A very common mistake I see in new homes they go into is a dog is given free reins of the house until they make a mistake, and then they try to bring the world back in. That tends to create a bit of frustration. It's a lot easier to keep that dog's world small, build their skill sets up, and expand how much access they have. There are no shortcuts for time and effort. I know shortcuts always sound appealing, but in behavior modification and skill building, there's no shortcuts. We just have to put the time and effort in to get what we want out of that interaction and the behaviors with our dogs. And last but not least, this is one I really encourage everyone to take seriously, which is plan for the worst, celebrate the best. Assume your dog is not house trained. Let them prove to you they are before you trust them. Assume that they are not good with your kids until they are. Don't assume things will be safe and then find out the hard way. Assume they won't be. Let the dog prove you wrong and that they are safe or have the skills to be successful in your house. So, how do we prepare for a new foster? So, very first thing is access provides opportunity and opportunity drives behavior. So, the very first thing we want to think about is how do we have a plan set up to control what our dog can access? Do we have dog safe areas of the house, places where they can't get into things that we don't want them getting into? They can't hurt themselves, they can't make bad decisions. Do we have areas where supervision is easy? If we can't see our dog, we can't train them. So we want to make sure that we understand where do we have easy supervision. They're not hiding behind walls and couches and in other rooms doing whatever they want. We want to be able to guide them down the path that we want. We want to avoid tight spaces or spaces with minimal exit routes. If your dog ends up being fearful or resource guardy or touch sensitive, getting stuck in tight spaces or without an exit route can not only trigger the dog, it can prevent you from finding a way to be safe. We want to kind of avoid exit points with a new dog loose in the house. We don't want them running out the front door, running out a side gate. We want to move them away from those areas until we know they aren't going to run. And the last part, have you identified any kind of no-go areas? So some folks will have beds off limits or offices off limits, or they'll have specific landscaping they don't want the dogs to get into or damage. It's important to recognize those ahead of time and put a plan in place to prevent your dog from getting access to those. We also want to review our house, the environment for dog-related hazards. Now, takes a few different forms, right? So, first thing is, well, what happens when they're energetic? As they run, as they play, as they jump, as they get in, as they investigate stuff, can they damage things? Can they hurt themselves? Things like shelves, pictures, art, breakable items, things your dog could accidentally run into and break with their body and or tail. Anyone with a big dog knows how dangerous a big tail can be. They are very good at sweeping things off of surfaces that you did not want swept off. And then we also want to look at blankets, towels, pillows, plants, knickknacks, and food. Say kitchen counters, things that the dog may or may not know is or is not a toy, or is not dog food. They are prone to using their mouth, so we want to think about what could they put into their mouth to chew, lick, or swallow. And last but not least, before that dog comes into your home, it's really good to ask yourself, do I have a safety contingency plan? Um, are you able to completely separate your new dog from yourself, from other people, or from other animals in the house? We want to make sure that we have that ability to be safe in the worst case scenario, that the dog ends up being aggressive towards you, friends, family, or other pets. So, what does supervision look like? Supervision with a new dog should be constant. It should be, you should know where that dog is at 100% of the time for the first few days, if not the first few weeks. Because again, we can only influence their behavior if we are present to see it and guide them. We want to do this by setting up a support system for ourselves. So first is our own eyes. We want to make sure, do we have the ability to keep eyes on them while we're in the home? If we can't physically put eyes on them, can we use a camera system to keep an eye on them to make sure they're in good shape? And last but not least, do we have friends, neighbors, or other, rescue or partners, rescue volunteers, or others who can help keep an eye on the dog if we are unable to? Gear. So part of being safe is having the right stuff in your house. There's no, clean, perfect list for this, but some of the things you want to think about, given the breed, the size, and age of your dog, is do you have the right leashes? Do you have short leashes, long leashes, standard leashes for different scenarios and different setups? We might use a short leash as a drag line along the house. So if we need to move something, we can. Um, we might use a long line for safety in the backyard so we can guide them. They have free rein to move, but we can guide them through other active areas where we want them and where we don't. Harnesses. Do you have a harness that fits your dog's body shape and size? Crates. Do you have a crate that you can use? Is it the right size? Is it easy to access? Is it easy to clean? Is it durable? Barriers. Do you have ability to use static barriers for doorways, for offices that we don't want the dog going through? Do we have things we can move around, like X-pens, to help contain dogs in certain areas as needed? And do we have the things we need to keep them safe? The more fun ones, toys. Not all dogs like the same toys, right? So just because you have a tennis ball for one dog doesn't mean you might need a squeaker ball for another. We might need soft toys for some, plush toys for some, hard toys for some. It's worth having a variety around so you can figure out what your dog finds the most interesting so we can teach them how to use toys and direct their energy to an appropriate location. Bowls, obviously, food and water are your primary ones, but it's also worth thinking about whether or not they're the right size for the size of your dog and whether or not they should be elevated. The ground is a long ways away for some larger, older dogs, so elevated bowls for water and food can make a big difference in their comfort. Do you have the right food for your dog? Do we have any food allergies? Do we have the right kibble size? Things along those lines. Treats, obviously, most dogs have preferences, right? Some dogs love crunchy stuff. Some dogs love soft stuff. Finding the right textures and flavors. They might be a meat dog. They might be a fruit or peanut butter or pumpkin dog. All sorts of options out there. And if you limit yourself to one, you may not be able to figure that out. And you may have a dog who isn't all that interested in what you have. And then muzzles. I don't think I think it's an underutilized tool, but muzzles are really worth having around. They can be very useful for a variety of reasons that are not just aggression. If we have dogs eating things, if we have dogs that have, we won't avoid vet trips, we can use muzzles to prevent consuming of things we don't like. Muzzles are also useful if we do have to make emergency visits and we don't know the dog yet to keep others safe. They're wonderful tools for dog-dog intros if we don't know the dog, because again, safety should be our first priority whenever we're approaching some of these new friends. All right, so what does the actual transition look like? So, very first part, that plan we just went through, can we execute it? We minimize access to the house and we slowly expand that freedom as we see the behaviors are put in place. We use our supervision plan, full supervision, and we don't have supervision, we contain them. Remember, you are an active participant in their activities. I think it's too common for new fosters to think things are okay and the dog disappears for 10, 15, 20 minutes and they go to the bathroom of the house. They chew on something they shouldn't. New dogs, you're actively engaged with them until it's time to take a nap, and then we put them someplace where it's safe to nap. That freedom should come with time, not something that's just defaultly given. And then gear. Where you position your gear can be very beneficial for how you are working with your dog. If all of your leashes are tucked into a closet 3 rooms away, they don't do you a lot of good. We may want to position food in common areas so we can readily reward. We may keep leashes near doors so they're easy to release going in and out. Barriers, tethers, other safety gear, again, depending on the dog, we want readily available. We don't want to have to work to go get those. And then we want to practice rewarding every time the gear is put on and removed. So with a new dog, we don't know their history. And so anytime we're clipping on leashes, putting on harnesses, putting on collars, we want to mark and reward each time it's put on and taken off. We want the dog to think that it's a really good thing. We want them looking forward to you putting on and removing that gear. We don't want to risk it becoming a negative experience. And then I would carry rewards at all times, especially for the first, 3 days to a week. You really want to reward all of the good choices. I think the example I use a lot for folks is most people tell me the dog goes 3, 4, 5 days, never counter surfs. And then a weekend it starts to counter surf. And I bet you 9 times out of 10, that dog was never rewarded for not counter surfing. And by that, I mean walking up to the kitchen counter, staring at it, and not jumping up. Yep, that's a behavior. That was waiting for food. Reinforcement doesn't come, they go looking for an alternate option. Safety. Recognize that all the dogs you pull in are going to have specific preferences and sensitivities. Some dogs will have both. Common things to be aware of here are paws, ears, their sides, their butt, handling their mouth. And sometimes for certain dogs, even a very direct approach and or reach um, can cause them some fear or discomfort depending on the experiences they've had, right? Again, we don't want to assume that these dogs are perfect with all handling. We want to take it slow, practice these things, read their body language, and that will come up a handful of times to this, but dogs communicate through their body language. So whether or not they're good or not good is completely dependent on our ability to read their body language. And when we're talking about petting and handling, remembering the 3 second rule is always a good thing to have in place for you, right? We pet for 3 to 5 seconds, we take our hands off, we give the dog a chance to decide. They lean back in for more pets. Awesome. Keep petting them. But we really want to give them the choice to opt out. It's really easy for dogs to feel constrained just through our proximity and or physical touch. I don't think we necessarily recognize that sometimes, but petting a dog can be restraint. And for some dogs, they won't always voluntarily get up and leave if we don't give them that chance. All right. And the very last thing here, from a safety standpoint, resource guarding. You're getting a dog out of a shelter, you're getting a dog out of a rescue of some kind. Odds are we have limited exposure to some of this stuff. So we want to assume that it's a possibility and put proactive management in place. We want to limit the items that they've been given or that's out for them. We want to clean everything else up. So that way, by controlling what they have access to, we can intentionally trade for those things with similar or higher value items. And that should be done every time they pick something up. We really, really want to try to avoid just taking something from dogs we don't know. You may not have been bit yet, but you're taking a risk, and that risk gets higher every time we do it. So again, body language is key there, right? That slight hover, that slight freeze, that slight lowering of the chest or head, that unwillingness to share or drop a toy can all be early signs of resource guarding. All right. When you do have to move or transport your dog, I do see this a lot. People are very quick to grab a dog's collar they don't know, or to put hands on their butt or shoulders, or try to pick them up to move them. I would very much recommend you do not do those things to a dog you don't know. Um, I would start with a verbal cue, maybe some just kissy noises, or a clicking noise, or a come or place, or give them a cue, see if they respond. That doesn't work, I'm grabbing some food. Most dogs, if you grab some food, you can get them to move, put them in a new spot, or reward them for moving with you. And if both of those fail, use a leash. You can either clip a leash to their collar, grab a slip lead, move with them, and when you're wherever you get them wherever you want to go, take it back off. And again, we can reward for the start and stop of those things along the way. Um, the more you reward for some of these things, the more you're setting the foundation for training, right? So even if they don't know recall cue, if you wander over, have them get up, reward them. As they move with you, reward them. You're building recall, you're building engagement, and you're building loose leash walking without even thinking about it. So I do want to kind of highlight some of the dangers of using the collar as your hands or body pressure to move a new dog. You do risk potentially creating a negative connotation with hands. If if your hands are consistently being used to force the dog to do something they don't want to do, they might start to look at hands reaching out for them, especially if they think something is going to be done to them as a negative. By reaching, we put not only our hands, but our body and face closer to the dog, which increases our risk of injury. Um, and every time we force our dogs to do something, it creates a dynamic that can impede future training, right? So if our dynamic is always based on force, your dog is less likely to want to opt into training in the future. Feeding. So meals, choose really anything your dog is going to be eating or can be stationary with. For a new dog, I really like to be doing this in the crate. And the asterisk there is that the crate in this instance is the place where they're going to be asked to be alone. So if you're not a crate person because you have a dog room, I would do this in the dog room with the door shut, or in that room so they build a opportunity to be alone and have a good experience being alone in those things. So our biggest idea here is we want to say, hey, look, being alone is a good thing with for a new dog. Let's use our meals, let's use our chews just to practice short versions of that. So that way, the first time we go use it, we don't have to just disappear and risk creating a negative connotation with being in those areas. I also tell everybody that early out with the dog, we gotta reward them a lot for stuff. And so I personally use a lot of their daily food, if I can, to reward very liberally for all of their good decisions. I do keep that to scheduled times. So I'll feed breakfast between, say, 7 and 9, or whatever's left, I will give them in their bowl. And I'll do that again around dinner times until they're house trained. And then I might open up those ranges. But I do want to make sure that they're eating consistently within specific windows. So that way their bowel movements are happening consistently within those consistent windows. All right, skill building. So dog is now in your house. We figured out how to be safe. What are we going to be working on? Well, like I mentioned, the very first thing is house training. Make sure that dog knows how to ask to get outside. Reward them for going outside. And I heavily encourage everybody to put going to the bathroom on cue. So that way, when you do need to leave the dog alone, you can give them the cue to go to the bathroom. They will sniff, go to the bathroom, and then they are empty when you have to leave them alone. It's a great way to help minimize the risks of mistakes in a house training protocol. So, next skill is what I would call kind of create a routine. Um, both a life routine and an interactive routine, right? So have very specific and consistent exercise throughout the day, right? Where do we exercise? How do we exercise? What variations of exercise? And what times a day are appropriate for exercise? Giving that dog that guideline helps them realize this is active time, this is quiet time. From day one, I work on consistent isolation and sleep routines. I both want my dogs to be able to be alone, and I want them sleeping consistently. So normal dogs should get 2 to 3 hour naps every day and then sleep through the night. Obviously, those numbers change based off of age and a little bit of breed. Some dogs will need a little bit less, some dogs will need a little bit more. But to have a dog that's getting the appropriate amount of sleep, that is what we should be targeting. And then we also want to practice coexistence without interaction. So it is very normal for folks in life to want to have their dogs included in what they're doing, but not actively in the way. And so I think a great example for this is mealtime. I don't need my dog head in my oven when I'm pulling stuff out that's 400 plus degrees, right? I want them to be able to relax on a bed outside of the kitchen while I'm doing kitchen stuff. If I have multiple dogs or multiple family members, I want to be able to interact with those dogs or those family members without the dog having to be involved. I'm going to intentionally include him at times, but I want him to be comfortable not being involved in those times because there are certain activities just not necessarily dog time. And then I want to make sure social time is built into everybody's routine. Active time with their dogs to play, to sleep, to cuddle, to get pets, to where they can express their need as a social species. So a marker. Anyone who spends any time with me is going to hear about a marker word. You're going to hear me and anyone on the board here say yes a lot when we're working interacting with dogs. Um, I give people a link here for this thing called Smart 50. So the idea here with a new dog is SMART is an acronym for see, mark, and reward training times 50. It sets a target for people to try to reward your dogs 50 times a day for behavior that they like. And this is a really good tool for a new dog, right? We're not going to do this for weeks on end, but we're going to want to early on reward our dog every time they go to the bathroom outside. We're going to reward our dog every time they lay down in a dog bed. We're going to reward our dog every time they don't jump on a counter, for appropriately greeting us, for um, practicing obedience cues, for all of the good things that they're already doing throughout the day. Food. It's a really good skill to have for your dog to be able to take food in a variety of methods, right? So we just give them their food in a bowl. We really limit how valuable the food, that tool can be in everything else that we do with our dogs, right? So we want to practice handing them food, tossing them food to catch, chasing food, foraging for some food. We want to incorporate it into enrichment and training. So that way the dog really enjoys not working with us, interacting with us, and doing it in a variety of ways that kind of set the foundation for other training activities. Play. That's the next part here is our dogs need exercise, and play is one of the most valuable ways to give that to them. We want to be able to teach them to play on their own, kind of self-entertain when it's not dog time. And we want to teach them how to play in a social setting, how to play with other people. If we have well-behaved social dogs, how to play with other dogs. All right. Boundaries. So here's another one that I would love to see everyone take seriously and then continue to make an effort for when they pull a new dog in their house. Teaching our dogs boundaries teaches them how to make decisions, how to respect space, how to be safe in our house. And so there's three types of boundaries that I encourage people to work on. One are physical or access boundaries. And this would be something like teaching a dog a threshold boundary, a threshold at each access point to the outside world, so that just because we open the door doesn't mean the dog should take off. There should be a pause, a release cue, a permission to move through, so that way they can physically stay safe. Social boundaries. This would include things like maybe you don't want your dog jumping on you, right? So we want to teach the dog how to appropriately greet. Um, I use a social boundary where I don't like my dogs to stand on top of me when I sit down on the couch. I just don't prefer them standing directly over me, so I teach my dogs to lay down next to me on the couch. And then we want to teach an engagement versus isolation boundary, right? When is it time to engage? When is it time not to? So that way the dog it isn't suffering from big, massive FOMO, can calm down when it's not their turn. Sleep, went over that one already, but just as a reminder, solid overnight sleep, anywhere from 6 to 9 hours. And then really we want naps, 2 to 3 naps or sleep times for 2 to 3 uninterrupted hours. And then the last part is enrichment. So the whole point of enrichment is to create behavioral diversity. So we want to find ways to give them mental, physical, sensory, and social enrichment. That's training, play, walks, and social time. All right, more specific skills to build into because a lot of those were life skills. Safety skills that I encourage everyone to start with for our dogs is thresholds. We don't want those escape artists. Loose dogs are not fun for anybody. Again, recall. Can we get the dog to come back to us as needed? Leave it and drop it. Those are good safety cues, right? So can we turn away from something that we don't want them investigating? And can they drop something that's in their mouth that they maybe should or shouldn't have in their mouth? Containment. Can they be isolated? Can they be confined? That's a very big safety skill to have. It pops up not only day to day, but emergency vet visits for emergency situations throughout the day. I like to teach a good stay and or place cue. So that way, if I need the dog to hold its position, it can do so reliably. That's very useful for a variety of tools, from greetings to kitchen safety to um, any sorts of other things that pop up there, right? Leash manners, obviously, learning to walk nicely on leash, very adoptable skill. A lot of people look for that one. And then I like to teach dog how to deal with arousal. So I know there's a few folks on this call who have very rowdy dogs. And so we want to teach those dogs when they come in, not just how to stay calm, but how to calm down once they get aroused, right? So we do this by identifying, well, when is it appropriate to get excited? When is it appropriate to get aroused? Like when is it time to display fast, large, bouncy behaviors, and give them the opportunity to do that. We also then want to incorporate thought into those behaviors, right? So we want to teach them how to sit, how to drop, how to recall, how to lay down in an aroused state so that they can practice listening when they're in an aroused state. If we only ever try to work through them outside of that, it can be too much sometimes. And then we also want to work to bring them back down. So not only do we want to intentionally bring them up, we want to intentionally stay with them to bring them back down. And that cycle over time is how we teach a dog to deal with arousal. We intentionally get them excited, we intentionally bring them down. And that's how they learn to do that on their own. So this one's a bit personal, kind of personal connotation here, because I get to walk into a lot of homes with folks, and it's always interesting to see how people define adoption ready. And I think a lot of folks really don't think about how realistic that statement is overall. Um, because I like to remind everybody, if the rescue put the dog in your home, maybe there's a few very rare exceptions to this, but if a rescue put a dog in your home, they've considered that dog adoption ready. Um, And so while that dog is in your home, there's no end goal here, right? Because what people consider adoption ready, there's all sorts of varied definitions and varied capabilities from fosters, adopters, and training, right? So foster expectation, fosters have certain expectations of what their dogs are. People will always disagree on what a good dog is and what isn't, right? Some folks will say dogs should never be allowed on couches and beds. Some dogs would laugh at that concept. Not all people have placement support. So depending on how difficult the dog is, it can be hard to place, and that can make things harder on certain folks. Training support. dog training always feels simple when you talk to someone who really knows they're doing, but simple and easy are two very different things. It is not easy to train. And so sometimes we don't have the skill sets or the environment to work on some of these behaviors. And again, it all goes to personal preferences, right? Some people love it, don't care at all. If dogs jump on them, some people hate that dogs jump on them. And so those personal preferences always play into that that idea of, well, is this dog adoption ready for adoption yet? Is it good enough? Um, and then access to resources are a big limiter, I would say, for most fosters. Um, because most behaviors that are labeled as problems require very specific resources to work on them. So, say you've got a dog that's really reactive to other dogs. Well, to support that, you need other dogs to go train with. And most folks don't have four, five, six friends with very healthy, social, calm dogs that they can call on and plan on utilizing for training three, four, five, six times a week. We're generally having to go into our neighborhood and hope we can find dogs that are not going to stare, not going to react, and then see if we can build behavior. And so it's a lot harder to build that way. Um, Same thing with stranger danger. I've had a number of clients with dogs that have dogs who struggle to greet strangers, right? Most people don't have a half dozen friends who want to come over and help train a dog that's barking at them. That's not a fun proposition for most folks, right? So that can make it really hard to work on. And I like to remind everybody with these two in particular, it's a really fine line on what is ethically appropriate while you're training some of these dogs by using the public. When you are actively using other dogs, other people and their dogs or people to train your dog, they've not consented to taking the risk with their personal dogs or personal space to help you, right? So it is a bit unethical to start to get way too close to other people, to have your dog tee off on them or their dog when they've not agreed to that. So we always have to be careful of that as well when we're going out to work on this. The very last part here is generalization. So a lot of folks, even with a dog in their house, they're like, my dog is great. And I say that's true. Very much. They're wonderful dogs. But behavior is typically specific to the environment and the people involved in the training. So if your dog's training is taking place in your house with you or in your neighborhood, there's no guarantee it will directly carry to the new family and the new neighborhood, right? They're likely going to have to be worked on again. The upside here and why we should still train is that every new environment we train in makes learning go faster, right? So all the work you do put in for your foster makes it that much easier for the adopter to repeat that work and get through it even quicker. So here's a handful of things that have popped up over time when people ask me about how to help their foster. Summer enrichment. So a lot of people get very dependent on walks to keep their dogs sane, which as we approach lows in the mid 90s this week, walks can be quite difficult because concrete's hot, dogs get hot, we can't risk their health. But I like to remind everybody that anything you can do outside, you can do inside, except actively be outside, right? So you can set up walking paths around your house. You can set up distractions around your house. You can practice walking indoors. You can play inside. You can train inside. So it takes a little bit of coordination, a little bit of creativity sometimes, but if you could do it outside, you can probably do it inside. I like to remind everybody, try to maximize the use of their daily food rations, right? Utilize food puzzles, slow feeders, scatter feeding, training. You can even wet and freeze some of the food so it becomes a licky mat as well as kind of something they can chew on. You can make them work harder for their food to burn some of that extra energy. And then building training into play and other daily routines. For a lot of dogs, and a lot of people see this after sessions with me, we it's not about play that really tires dogs out. If you can challenge them, you can make their brain work harder. you'll find that they tire out a lot faster than if you're just trying to physically run them out. So by building in obedience and tricks and impulse control activities into play, you can burn significantly more energy and create a calmer dog that can survive the heat. Obviously, we can increase enrichment activities, right? We can add in chews, um, frozen items, and other things to help burn some of that energy. Some of the less common ones are kind of novel object exposure. You can bring home random balls, random things. You can let dogs sniff through the groceries each time you come home, assuming they don't eat your groceries. So that way, all the new stuff that pops up can be part of their daily enrichment activity. One I thought was funny when I moved down here, but I understand more and more every year are car trips. Crank the AC and go drive around for 10 or 15 minutes. If your dog is comfortable in the car, there's a whole lot going on out there. And dogs tend to enjoy staring out the window, watching the world go by. That's a fun activity for them. If your dog is social, push yourself out of your comfort zone if you're like me, and get more people and dogs into your house. Let the other people be the enrichment to burn that energy. If your dog enjoys having them, they'll enjoy that. That'll be the way they burn their energy. It's a great way to tire them out. You can always look for sniff spots and other dog-friendly store situations, right? Rent out someone's yard, find some place with some shade or some water you can do. Your dog is safe to do so. Walk around to Petco, walk around to PetSmart, walk around to Home Depot. You can burn some energy that way. I will say, getting in and out of the stores, be careful of the asphalt. A lot of those parking lots can be very, very hot, and even just putting your dog down can burn paws. So do think about that and how to get them in and out safely if you go traveling with them. And then you can intentionally build in sensory activities. You could bring in weird flooring stuff. You can dig into some nose work, um, and see if you can get them kind of using their brain, get them searching, get them hunting, get them finding things, right? Dogs are kind of built to use their nose, and so most dogs are usually pretty happy to do something along those lines. If you're looking for more stuff, you can always go to our website. We do have an entire page dedicated to enrichment and a variety of resources for you if you want help. Coming up with novel things to do for your pups. All right, routines. So this one always gets a little interesting, but like I mentioned earlier, I like to break the concept of a routine down into two different categories. There's kind of the daily, weekly routine where we want to kind of set an expectation for our dog, where we're going to have a morning routine, a midday routine, and an evening routine. This obviously shifts with everybody's sleep cycles, but when a dog gets up, they're going to have energy. So we need to find a way to get them exercise. We want to find a way to burn that energy, do something that's going to really get their blood going, do something kind of hot, very kind of really workout wise. We want to make sure they're eating well, and we want to help them practice settling. And of course, we should get our first nap of the day. They're going to sleep for 2, 3, maybe 4 hours if we're lucky, and then they're going to need to repeat a lighter version of that midday. Another bit of exercise, a little bit of settling, and then again, we should go back to sleep. And then evening rolls around. So we're going to get dinner time. We're going to get, again, a larger amount of exercise in. I mean, I know a lot of folks talk about the witching hour. For dogs, that occurs somewhere between 4 and 8, but there's generally an hour that night where their dog goes nuts. And I always remind everybody, makes sense. They've been sleeping all day or sleeping all afternoon. It's time to give them something to do. That walk is no longer enough to have tired them out. And that's also why enrichment shows up here and not in the other ones. Because there's more time in the evenings for most folks, that is usually where enrichment can be put to most use. We can get the exercise in, and then we can give them something to chew on for 15, 20, 30 minutes, depending on the dog. And that way we can help burn that energy without having to drive ourselves nuts. And of course, settling, that last settle is usually a great time for some of that social engagement because most folks are working, don't have time in the morning and midday, but that's a great time to do some cuddling, do some petting, really give the dog that social connection they typically crave. And of course, we're going to bed overnight. So that's kind of that daily routine, right? So the other part of this is I like to encourage people to build routines around the things that we do. And so those things can pop up at different times of day, but build a routine around alone time. So that way the dog has the ability to go be left alone. Pick times of day where it's going to be easier for the dog, but make sure that dog doesn't have access to other people or dogs or animals in the house. We really want to practice being alone. Alone is a pretty important skill for our dogs to build up. Practice a routine around solo time. A lot of trainers will recommend teaching a place cue for this, right? To where we want the dog in the room with us, but it's not time to actively interact. And so we want to give them the ability to self-entertain while sharing space, but not actively having to participate. This can be harder, but more important for multi-dog households, because it's a really good skill and a really important skill for each of your dogs to be able to be in one part of the house and doing something different while you interact with the other dogs without feeling the need to come be part of that. There's always reasons for that, and it could keep everybody sane if we're not having a bunch of stress built around trying to interact with the dog individually. Create a routine for greetings, right? I don't know if I care what it looks like, but set an expectation for your dog on how to greet new people, how to greet new dogs, when and where it's appropriate, what kind of energy that you want, so that way they know what's expected of them. Create routines around boundaries, right? So your personal space boundaries, your access boundaries, how dogs gain access to things is a boundary, right? So do they launch themselves to get a toy, or do they wait until you hand it to them? Can they sit calmly while you give them their treats or their food? Can they sit calmly for leashes and harnesses to be put on? So those kind of boundaries are really useful that the dog learns, hey, look, I can take a step back, I can calm down, and then all the good stuff happens. Um, and like I just mentioned, so generally speaking, throughout our entire lives with our dogs, for most folks, I try to tell everybody, look, keep in mind, teaching your dog that calm equals access and arousal equals no access is a pretty good tip to follow, right? For most dogs going to most homes, people want their dog to be calm to do stuff, right? We don't want to teach our dog on the whole. There's obviously people who do like this, but most adopters don't want a dog who is spinning in circles every time the leash and harness them out. That can't let someone in the house before greeting and jumping all over them, knock stuff out of their hands, right? So the more we teach our dogs that calming down gets them what they want, not amping up, is going to make an easier dog for most folks to handle. And the very last thing I like to throw out for everybody is teach your dog how to work with you. Working together, dogs are innately social creatures. They want to engage for the most part. And I encourage most fosters train something. And I mean literally anything. I don't care what it is, because the behavior itself is not as important as the active time together, right? Because the more the dog learns to work with people, the more they're willing to engage and connect to people, the more willing they're going to be engaging with folks in meet and greets, the more willing they're going to be to learn new stuff in their new home. Like the literal act of training creates a dog who's more adoptable, even if we don't end up teaching a whole lot. That working together increases adaptability significantly. All right, crate training. I know this one pops up enough because ideally with the crate, we take our time. We make sure the dog really wants to go in there. It's not always an option for a new dog in the house, right? We don't have necessarily want to be letting them free roam. They might destroy stuff. They might go to the bathroom. And so there's some tips here for expediting crate training. So one of the first things I remind everybody is start immediately. Every time I bring a new dog in the house, I leave food in the kennel. 2 or 3 treats are just always in the kennel if we're in the room. So that way, anytime the dog goes over the kennel, there's something great in there. I want the dog to almost think that that thing is magic, and that it can just create treats for it, right? Um, Reward any and all interaction with the kennel. If they sniff it, if they boop it, if they step it, if they go in, I'm marking and rewarding. Um, I also think it's really important that we focus on quick reps, right? So I want to reward for approach, quick entry, and I want to bring them right back out. One of the mistakes I see that's pretty common is that people tend to only use the crate if they need to shut the door. We want the dog to think it's fun to go in there, fun to get stuff, and that it's not an isolation activity 100% of the time, right? So we want to throw them in there, let them back out, put them in there, let them back out. We want to keep those reps up so that a dog doesn't go, wait, this is a trick. You put me in here, shut the door, and you left. This sucks, right? We don't want them learning that early. We want the in and out, the in and out, the in and out. Um, and then we do want to use anything that can be done in the kennel, do it. Meals, chews, enrichment, use the kennel for it. Door can be open or closed, depending, but we want to do all of that fun stuff in kennel so the dog, again, has that strong reinforcement history with being in and being calm. I do like to make sure kennels are the default sleep location for my routines for new dogs. That can mean that I have either multiple kennels or I'll move my kennel to a conducive area where I may need it in my bedroom to start. Then I'll slowly move it away from my bedroom to wherever I want them to sleep long term. But I'm going to try to use that kennel as the default sleeping location. Again, it's a free chance to settle and be calm when we sleep overnight. They're gonna want to sleep. If they need to do that near us, okay. But it's a great way to build up some of that kennel behavior. And here is probably my biggest trick. It's the social facilitation. So if I had a dog who's struggling to settle, which can be pretty common from a new foster or a newly adopted dog, I'll place it in the common area or I'll set up near the kennel and I will literally be on my phone, on my tablet, or even sometimes I've gotten to the point where I've just fallen asleep outside of the kennel while they're falling asleep. I have found that if I can be there with them until they fall asleep and then leave, it tends to be a lot easier for them to stay asleep or go right back to sleep when I get up to go out than if I just try to leave completely and see and hope they fall asleep, right? So I will sit there with them and I will admit it's not the most fun thing I've done. And I've sat there for 45 minutes to an hour at times for some dogs that really struggled. But I have found that every single day I do that, that time comes down, and 2, 3, 4 days in, I'm able to put them away. They go to sleep, and I go to bed. We've built that routine up, and I've helped them feel safe by staying there with them. And I will say, if food doesn't amp them up, you can always just kind of very slowly and calmly reward them for approximations of calm, right? They offer the sit, they offer the down, they offer the sigh, they offer the yawn, they close their eyes the first time. We can reward those things as long as it doesn't amp them back up. And then I also like to remind everybody, do think about your kennel. Make sure it's the right size. We don't want it too big. We don't want it too small. We want them to be able to stand up, turn around, lay out flat comfortably. Pick an appropriate bedding. I tend to see not enough padding in kennels. We'll put towels in, we'll put other stuff. People are more worried about the dog destroying something than their comfort, which I get, but we do want it to be comfortable. The more comfortable they are, the more likely they are to sleep. Now, I'll put an asterisk on that as well because if your dog runs hot, they might prefer the plastic floor to a thick bed. Those dogs do exist, and so it takes a little trial and error. Um, and if your dog is a shredder, you can always look into bed covers. So I personally have used a company called Canine Ballistics. They create what they call chew-proof dog beds or dog bed covers. And so I'll throw those over other dog beds to help prevent some of that destruction if I'm concerned about it. Coverings. I get asked this question a lot, and I tell everybody there's no definitive answer to this one. This is a trial and error thing. Some dogs may love it if you throw a sheet over their kennel. It may black it out, it may tone down some of the noise, it may put them right to sleep. Some dogs, you cover the kennel, it might make things worse. They might panic. Some dogs, it may make absolutely no difference. The only way you're going to know for sure if it helps your particular dog is to try it and monitor their response and their body language. And then the last part is the type of kennel. So I know we talked about the size, but there's also a number of different types of kennels. Most people have a wire kennel. Awesome, so do I. It's a great starting point. Some people have airline crates, some people have impact crates, some people have tiger crates. There's a handful of different options, and sometimes the different options can play a role in how comfortable the dog feels in it. They may have a history with certain styles or looks that they struggle with and ones that they don't. So obviously finding one that they don't have an issue with is going to make it easier for them to settle. All right, loose leash walking. So this is a complex behavior. And if you don't have a good strategy for how to work with your particular dog, I encourage you to work with a professional to put that plan in place. But some easy things to get you started down that path is one, start simple. People do way too much with dogs who love to pull and think that they're going to go walk 2 or 3 miles or around their entire block. I mean, you really want to focus on keeping that world small. Like, it's not uncommon for me to spend 2 or 3 days in my driveway with a new dog before I ever consider leaving and walking my neighborhood. I want to make sure that they understand how to move with me, that they can understand that that they're not supposed to pull against the leash. I want to make sure that I've got my marker word. I want to make sure I've got their check-ins where they're looking at me every once in a while, tracking what I'm doing, tracking where I'm moving. I want to build up my different types of reinforcement deliveries, the hand, the catch, the toss, the chase. And then I want to intentionally increase my criteria, right? So instead of just saying, hey, look, I conquered the garage, I'm going to walk everywhere now. I'm going to start adding 2 or 3 hours at a time each day. Make sure I can repeat all those same activities in those new areas. And over the span of 3, 4, 5 days or a week, I'll expand that out to where I can get through a neighborhood walk or something like that. But I'm going to do it intentionally, right? I'm not just going to go out and hope. And if you don't quite know how to think about that, always think about the 3Ds: duration, distance, and difficulty, right? So duration is may not be the most is easy to recognize what it means, but from a walking standpoint, it might be confusing to some folks. And I always remind everybody that dogs have the cognitive capacity of somewhere between a 2 and a 5-year-old, right? Nobody expects a 5 or 6-year-old to stay focused for 2 or 3 hours. They expect them to stay focused for maybe 10 or 15 minutes at a time. And so when you're working on loose leash walking, if we're thinking, hey, look, I'm going to go out for an hour, that's a long time. You may have to spend 5 or 10 minutes on leash, go in the backyard, go inside, take it off, play for 10 or 15 minutes, go back out for 5 or 10, go back in for 5 or 10, and repeat that process. Because the longer you're out there, the harder it is for them to focus, the more likely they are to get frustrated or tired, the more likely they are to make decisions that aren't conducive to our training plan. And you always want to make sure you're focusing on rewarding for and maintaining engagement. Does the dog know where you're at? Right? We want to make sure that they're giving you some eye contact, occasionally walking by your side, moving with you if you move left and right. Like, that engagement is everything for loose leash walking. And then last but not least, target weak spots, right? Utilize controlled distances and difficulties to practice exposures. So the example I like to use here is a lot of dogs will get really excited to go sniff something, a pole, a bush, really any vertical surface, right? And so they take off, they pull into it. Well, we can intentionally teach a dog to access something moving slower, right? We can put a food bowl down. We can use a bush at the end of the driveway. We can reward them for moving with us and practice. Hey, all right, you ready? Go sniff, but on a loose leash, calm pace. So that way we can build up the skill sets for the areas that we're struggling. And I do want to say it's important to focus on achieving normal dog activities, not just eye contact. To get the most out of your walk, you want your dog sniffing. You want them scanning the environment calmly. You want them moving kind of side to side and taking it all in. We don't want a dog that is just staring at you for 45 minutes while you walk a loop, right? We want them using their head, their nose, their eyes, their ears, their brain, and taking in the environment, because that's where the enrichment occurs for the walk. The physical side of that is a small portion of the overall enrichment plan for a walk. So we do want to teach them how to sniff and mark and pee and poop and mark and kick while they're out walking. All right, supporting an anxious dog. Reward desired behaviors and think as simple as doing nothing. Think about the Smart 50 thing I highlighted. Anxious dogs lack confidence. So the more that you reward the behaviors that they choose, the more confident they are in their decisions. Build a predictable routine. All the stuff we went through before, but for some dogs, even less change is better, right? We want to intentionally keep it simple so they know they'll be safe. Be a body language expert. The quicker you can spot their stress, the quicker you can deal with it. And so we want to be an expert on reading that dog's body language. Use your enrichment plans. Make the extra effort to find the appropriate outlets. If the dog can't go for a walk because the world's too scary, we have to put in the effort to give them those outlets somewhere else, through play, through walks in the backyard, through sniff spots, and so on. And as a reminder, don't force it, find it. You can't force a dog to feel safe, right? So if they're struggling to settle, recognize it's going to take some time. Each time they settle, reward it. Use enrichment to help facilitate behaviors, right? If we're trying to get stationary behavior, use lick mats, use Kongs, use chews. They're no longer pacing. That's a good thing. Um, Confinement and restraint. I know we really want to get that done, but if you force a dog into those situations, you're likely to create more stress. And so we want to use those specifically and intentionally so that they build up their confidence levels. And never forget the importance of the environmental setup. If your dog doesn't like strangers and you have people coming in the house, don't let the dog free roam. Keep them away from the stranger as that stranger comes in. Intentionally put enrichment out that they can focus on instead of the new stranger. Help them make decisions that aren't practicing the things we're trying to overcome. So the one thing I do like to remind everybody here as well is you need to be careful on how you read what I'll call a quote unquote tantrum. So when a dog is struggling, we want to be very careful on how we respond to that, right? Because we don't want them to just be in full on panic mode. We don't want to make it worse, and we don't want it to just become something we can never recover from, right? So while we're watching that body language, we really want to be looking for a dog that even if he barks once or twice, even if he's a little stressed, is he settling? Is he calming back down? And if he is, great. We can continue that training session. But if it is staying static or getting worse, we need to get the dog out of there and reset the plan so that way they're able to learn something new and build a better behavior set. Um, and then build a shaping plan for whatever it is, right? So if they're scared of the vacuum or dogs or people, if you can't create a plan, work with a professional to help you create one. So that way you have a solid option for how to expose your dog to the scary things. All right, handful of other questions here. Chewing or destructive behavior is pretty common. And I tell everybody with a new dog, it's not as much about training as it's about management. If your dog is destroying stuff, it's because you let them destroy stuff. We need to minimize or prevent their access from those things and then provide them appropriate outlets. And that can be done through enrichment plan, whether or not that's chews or destruction boxes. We can give them an outlet for chewing. Um, Digging pops up a fair bit as well. I like to remind everybody that digging isn't inherently bad. It's a very natural dog behavior. And just like with chewing, if you don't want you to dig, you have to manage your dog so they aren't in a position to dig. And then we need to solve the problem, we need to either find an alternative outlet for that digging, as far as other forms of exercise, or give them the option to dig in a place that's safe. And I'll use the example of like a park sand volleyball court. I've taken dogs to those before, gone right to the middle, let the dog go crazy digging a hole in the middle of the volleyball court. When he's done, I kick the sand back over so it looks just like it was when he started, but my dog got that chance to dig in a place to where it was appropriate to do so. All right, jumpy, mouthy greeters. Like everything else so far on this slide, first part to preventing that is managing the environment, and that is usually through leashes or barriers. Your dog can't jump and be mouthy greeting someone if it doesn't have access to that person. So we prevent that first so we can get into the training plan. The next part is we also want to say, can you provide an outlet prior to and during greetings, right? Can we play before someone comes over? Or if we're in a greeting, can we give them something to do that's not so static? Chasing toys, chasing food, running around, taking breaks. And then don't let it go on too long. So the longer it goes on, the more likely to get frustrated and likely to jump. So you want to practice 2 to 3 seconds greeting, take a break. 2 seconds greeting, take a break, repeat that to build up the behavior of full on the floor, appropriate greeting. All right, one more slide here. And any questions that pop up, we'll go through those. I know a lot of folks will end up with a reactive or aggressive dog at some point. It happens to everybody. It is possible to help your dog through that. You're going to work through a combination of desensitization and counter conditioning. How much progress you make will always be dependent on each situation. Some dogs might end up being able to be playful. Some dogs might end up just being non-reactive at a distance, say across the street. For anyone who has those dogs, I always recommend muzzle training is a good place to start. and then working with the trainer. Because again, we could talk about working with reactive dogs. I can make it its own presentation, but those are our starting points. It can be done. It requires work, and a muzzle is always a great safety tool. Separation anxiety, not my most favorite topic, but does pop up. There are no shortcuts to working for separation anxiety. You have to find the right combination of meds to minimize the stress of any separation periods required. And then you need to establish a support team to help you watch those dogs when they have to be alone. And then I recommend for everybody to engage with a separation anxiety specialist to work through a separation anxiety training plan. There are folks who specialize in it, folks who have all the resources for it, and then the fastest way to do it is to work with people who really know the behavior inside and out. The one thing I'll remind everybody here is that there is a difference between separation anxiety, isolation distress, and confinement stress. So confinement stress is specific to being stressed out in a small space. Some dogs will not, a small percentage of dogs, but will not do a kennel. That's confinement space. You let them out, stress goes away. That's not separation anxiety. That's a stress about being confined. Uh, Isolation distress, that's pretty normal for new dogs. First few days to a week, those dogs don't want to be left alone. It's scary. They don't know they're in a new home. They don't know what's safe and not safe. They just don't like being separated. You'll find where the isolation distress tends to fade as you fall into your routine. And it's not always just about being alone. It can be even about being included. Um, but then there is full-blown separation anxiety, and that is an anxiety disorder where a dog literally struggles with the fact of being left alone. And that typically occurs the instant they're left alone, and the symptoms can vary, but there is a difference here, and recognizing that can help you decide how treatable it is for you in your environment. All right, last portion, stranger danger. In household or not, but in house in particular, if you haven't bring a dog home and it turns out that dog is good with one of the people in the house, but not the other, the very first thing I tell everybody, we need to figure out a way to limit how much interaction the dog has outside of intentional setups, right? So for the person that's scary, we want to make sure that the only time that dog has access to that person is when we want it to happen. So that we can guarantee that good associations are being made. If we let it happen by chance, that person is likely to startle that dog often enough that it probably will impact the success of any training you try to do. If the dog is a safety risk, or if we don't know, I remind everybody you want to target 2 layers of safety. It's not enough to just close a crate. We want to close a crate and put a door up. We want to use a muzzle and a leash. We want to use X-Pen and a baby gate. Safety measures fail, and if you have 2 in place, that way you can keep everyone safe in that house. And then again, if you're in this situation, work with a trainer. It can be tough to work through on your own, and I always remind everybody, hope is not a strategy. If you're hoping it gets better, ask for help. It's too easy for it to bite you in the butt if you're just hoping for an improvement. All right. Um, Feel free to check out our website or reach out to us if you have any other questions. And if anyone has any questions here about the presentation or about fostering, we'll open it up to everybody to ask. If not, we'll call it a night.
We are a little bit over,
Yeah,
but
I don't have any questions, but I'm totally stealing that. I hope it's not a strategy thing. I'm going to use it over and over again now.
yeah, that's great. I just want to say if you have to hop off, feel free. But if you do want to ask any questions, we'll stay on for a little bit later so that we can have some questions asked. Great presentation. Thank you so much, Dan.
That was really good, Dan. I have thoughts that I wrote down for everything, but yeah, the gear call out, like, you gatekeeping over here. No, I'm just kidding. No, a lot of stuff that I didn't even think about, like that gear rewarding thing. Like that was a good. I honestly don't even do that with. I need to just work on it with this guy because he is very much like that type that I should be. Yeah, so good call. Anybody?
Comment? Just kidding. Thank you for your comment. Anybody else have any questions or comment? I'm like, comments are welcome. Like if you want to tell Danny's did a great job, then
No,
by all means, please do.
I literally usually know everything, and when I don't know something that's coming, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I'm good. No more questions.
I thought it was really thorough,
Yeah.
Very thorough.
which I
Yeah.
like.
Great
You
job.
almost like feel
Like-
stupid asking a question after that.
Well, sometimes you forget things, like because
Uh-huh.
your dog is different. So like you might have used something with a dog 2 dogs ago, and then you have a new foster and you forget. Like when I cleaned Scooby's ears out, I forgot that Chunk wasn't reactive until we had his ears cleaned.
Mhm.
Scooby becoming reactive to other dogs after I cleaned his ears makes more sense.
Yes.
Um,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
The placement of the crate thing too, that socialization
Yeah.
factor, like the conversation of like where to place crates that happen so much between foster transitions and stuff like that's that. But yeah, I loved it. Thanks, Dan.
I also really like, I mean, there was a little bit of a teaser for working with reactive dogs presentation in there, and I love that idea. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. Okay.
You're funny.
Just a couple of quick things. Our newsletter will be coming out. There is a sign up for the newsletter. If you are not currently getting the newsletter and would like to, you can go to our website. I did put in the chat the enrichment site from our website, which is, I mean, just a more direct pathway for the enrichment items that Dan was referring to. Oh, look at the puppy.
Look, I was gonna say, who's that big black beautiful baby?
I'm sorry, I got real distracted.
I know.
Easily distracted by dogs.
He's so
Other than
funny.
that, we don't currently have anything scheduled for July for summer school. I'm still working on potentially scheduling someone, but we do have 2 presentations coming up in August, and our dates for classes and enrichment at county are all listed on our website. I did update the Give Pulse, or no, sorry, the Sign Up Genius.
We haven't used that for like 5 years, bro.
Yeah, I know, whoops. I did update the Sign Up Genius, so it will only have classes from this year listed on there. And as we get the videos up on our YouTube channel, I will add those to the bulk, like the header portion of that section. So if you have missed any presentations, there's also presentations from last year. Feel free to check those out. And once again, thank you so much, Dan. What a great presentation. We really appreciate everything you do. And thank you all for coming out and spending a Thursday evening with us. We appreciate you, and we know that you have other things to do and work and all that stuff. So thank you for coming out.
Yep. Take
Thank
care,
you
everybody.
for
Have a good one.
helping us. Thank you. Thank you,
Bye,
Dan. Thank
guys.
you.
Bye. Bye, all the babies and Nami.